So it's time for April's Tarot TBR game, and we have stories ranging from Rapunzel to the Roman god of doorways. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps me out as a small creator, and let's bring on the books. Hi everyone, it's Bells. Welcome back to my channel. So as always, we are using the Tarot of the Divine deck by Yoshi Yoshitani. It's full of fairy tales and folklore, and it's absolutely gorgeous. While we're going through the little shuffle here, let me just establish the rules. I realized last time I did not do a great job at establishing the rules because I just wanted to jump into the storytelling. I pull a minimum of 5 cards for 5 books. For every card that comes up that is reversed, I add an extra card, and every card of the minor arcana that matches numbers, so like King of Cups and King of Wands, I also add an extra card. But this time, because last month I had so many books to read and I felt like I was really rushing to try and get through all of them, which I don't really enjoy, I decided to cap this one off at 8 books, just so I don't feel like I'm turning my passion into a chore. The first card that I pulled was chaotically the Tower. So, if that's gonna tell you how the rest of this video is gonna go. The story that's represented on here is Rapunzel, if you couldn't tell by the long braid. And first of all, did you know that Rapunzel's based on a true story? Because I didn't. Saint Barbara, who is believed to have lived in like the 3rd century, was so beautiful that her father locked her away in a tower so no men could get to her. Yikes. Also, Rapunzel is a vegetable. It's a Grimm era, like leafy green, which I also didn't know. So the Grimm story actually starts with a woman who covets this witch's Rapunzel crop and gets her husband to go and steal it for her until the witch catches her, and says they can have as much of the Rapunzel as they want if they give up their first child to her. And they agree, which like, what the fuck? So the girl that they ended up having, the child, was named Rapunzel and was the most beautiful child, of course, but obviously they gave her to a witch, and when the girl turned 12, the witch trapped her in a tower with no doors, no stairway. If the witch wanted to come up, she'd have to do the whole like let down your hair spiel. Some years later, a king's son, so a prince, was riding through the forest and heard her singing, but couldn't find a way up the tower. But the song like touched him so much that he came back to listen to her sing every day. And one day he heard the witch request Rapunzel's hair to come down. And so he did the same thing, which like, first of all, how did that work? You don't like look out the window to see who's coming up? Like, wouldn't you notice that your mother's voice doesn't sound like her anymore? I don't know. So the prince goes up, they meet, she's like, what the fuck? You're a dude. She's scared of him, naturally, but he said like how much her song touched him and asked if she would marry him, to which she said yes, but she can't get down without any help. She said that every time that he visits her, to bring her like some silk that she can then weave into a ladder. And everything was fine. The plan was going along well until Rapunzel was stupid and mentioned the prince to the witch. And obviously the witch got pissed and cut off her hair and threw her into the wilderness to suffer. Then the witch kept the hair, and then when the prince came back the next day, like hoisted the prince up, told him that Rapunzel was dead, and he throws himself out of the tower in grief, magically doesn't die, but falls into a patch of thorns that pluck out his eyes, so now he's blind and just wandering around, and just wanders through the forest for years until he happens upon the wilderness where Rapunzel was, where she gave birth to his 2 twins. And she cried out of happiness that he was there, and her tears fell in his eyes, and he was no longer blind, and led her into his kingdom where they lived out their days. The card, the Tower, is chaos. Expect the unexpected. Change will come when you are most comfortable. In the end, it'll be for your highest good, but there is change a-coming. So my prompt for the Tower is not actually a book prompt. It's like a card setup prompt. So basically I have to set all the cards that I would have previously picked aside, reshuffle the deck, and pull an all new spread with an extra card. I mean, talk about chaos with this being the first card I pulled. I didn't have to set aside any cards, but I did reshuffle the deck and began the pulls again with a new minimum of 6 cards, although I'm still capping it at 8. The next card that was pulled after the Tower, so the first card, is the Page of Swords, which is the Princess Parizade, which we actually saw in my last tarot video. And it's the story of Princess Parizade's quest for 3 magical objects, and there's a whole other backstory that's called the story of the 2 sisters who were jealous of their younger sister, and I linked that version below if you're interested because I think it's wild. There's 3 objects, the talking bird, the singing tree, and the golden water. She wants them for her garden, asks her brothers to get them for her, and so her one brother goes, finds a priest who's like, you're gonna die, but go down this Path of Rocks. Basically, it's like a valley of stones that will try to get the prince to turn his head, and if he does, he will become a black stone like the rest. So Prince goes into the valley, does a good job, but basically the stones like yell insults and threats at you, which just sounds horrible. And so he withstands it for a long time, eventually panics though and turns to flee, turns into a stone. So Parazad's other brother sets out, meets the same priest, falls into the trap. So no other brothers left, so Parazad goes herself, but when she meets the priest, she goes, oh, they're gonna yell at me. Cool, and stuffs her ears with cotton before she walks through the stones. Because the voices aren't as overwhelming, she's able to reach the mountaintop and find the talking bird, who then directs her to the other magical objects, and she takes the golden water and sprinkles it all over the stones, turning everyone back into men. This ending is just like freaking wild. When they return home, Parazad uses the bird's advice to convince the Sultan that her and her brothers are his true children, and they just like go to live in the palace. The card, the Page of Swords, represents youthful intelligence, energy, passion. You could do anything. You just have to like stay with your goal. Don't get distracted by other things. The prompt that I have for this is a young adult novel that is informative or challenging, or I may spin the Wheel of Fortune since I don't have a lot of young adult novels on my TBR. So I spun the Wheel of Fortune, of course, because why not? And it landed on pick any prompt. So I got a free book pick, which is rad. The book that I picked is Bunny by Mona Awad, which is a horror about this girl who's in like a fancy master's program that she was super excited for, but she winds up hating. And she gets drawn into this group of like really privileged girls who dabble in the dark arts. So it's supposed to be super campy and very weird and very dark. I'm so into it. I'm so excited. That was the book that I wound up picking for the Page of Swords. The next card that I picked was Judgment. The deity represented here is Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, who is a Chinese trickster god. This is one version of his origin story. Basically, there's this magical rock on top of a mountain, and a harsh breeze like blew on the rock, and out popped a fully grown monkey, Sun Wukong, and he very quickly established himself as like a really powerful forest demon. When it was time for him to die, Wukong managed to trick Yan Wang, who is the king of hell, into allowing him to return to Earth without undergoing reincarnation, and also erased his and every other forest monkey's name from the Book of Life and Death. And so Yan Wang was mad about the disruption of the balance of life and death, and so appealed to the Jade Emperor, who I believe is close to like God. And so the Jade Emperor's idea was basically to let Wukong live in heaven so he could feel important, but was given the lowest task. Because he was a monkey, he knew that the other gods would never see him as an equal, and so he devoted himself to the pursuit of everlasting life so he would never have to worry about ascending to heaven. And so after like a really embarrassing party and a war that Wukong won, the Jade Emperor was forced to acknowledge his power, tried to acknowledge his power, but it wasn't enough for Wukong. He pissed off the Emperor again, won a whole other battle before the Emperor went and tattled to Buddha, and Buddha said, what the fuck, no, and banished Wukong from heaven, put him under a mountain to reflect on his actions. Judgment. The Judgment card shows a spiritual awakening, a big decision, a day of reckoning and forgiveness. If it shows up in a spread, you're reaching like a really significant stage in your life's journey. You should be like purging your guilt and your sadness from the past so you can be refreshed and like ready for life's new challenges. So the prompt that I have for Judgment is to finish a book I stopped reading or DNF'd because Judgment. And I may spin the Wheel of Fortune if I want to, so I did, duh. And I landed on every card has the additional prompt of a BIPOC author. Super fun, super fun. So I'm gonna tell you right now, 2 of the books don't apply to this just because they didn't have options for them. One of them is the book that I picked for this card, which is Untamed by Glennon Doyle. This is her memoir about like being a woman, following your heart, how we can set boundaries, honor our feelings, etc. It's basically a self-help book in the guise of a memoir. I've read like half of this like over a year ago, and I just kind of stopped. I don't know why, I just never really cared to finish it. Yeah, I'm gonna finally finish it and get it off of my like currently reading because it's been on there for at least a year, I swear. And like, I remember liking it. I remember her writing being good and it feeling motivational. So I feel like it'll be fine. That's what I picked for Judgment. The next card that I picked was the King of Wands, and what's represented here is the Phoenix. So the Phoenix, very well-known mythological creature. One of the most popular origin stories is that they lived in paradise. After 1,000 years in paradise, it was basically time to reincarnate, and flew into the mortal world, stopped in Arabia for spices and herbs, especially cinnamon, and then went to Phoenicia, which is likely named after the Phoenix, and built a nest out of the herbs to then wait for the sun god. So the next morning, the Phoenix faced the sun god as it rose in the east and sang such a beautiful and sad farewell song that the sun god just had to stop moving the sun across the sky and listen to him. And when the Phoenix finished, the sun god continued his journey. Because of the weight, a spark fell from the sky and ignited the herbs and the Phoenix in flames. A worm was all that was left. And after 3 days, a new Phoenix would rise from the ashes, supposedly transformed from the worm, and begin the next 1,000-year cycle. The King of Wands as a card literally represents like pure fiery energy and is a symbol of strength. The King of Wands, when it pops up, suggests you're stepping into a leadership role maybe, and are manifesting a vision with the help of those around you. The prompt that I have for this, for king cards, it's a male author, and for wand cards, it is something adventurous or inspiring. And so I picked Ring Shout by P. Delle Clark, which is a horror novella where the KKK members are demons, literally like bringing hell to earth, and this gal and her resistance fighters are the only thing standing in the way, but they have to stop the clan before the demons like end the world. I think it's gonna be a good, if upsetting, time. So that is what I picked for the King of Wands. Next, I pulled the Ace of Wands reversed. This story might be one of my favorites. This is the Magic Paintbrush, and this is a Chinese folk tale about this poor, very nice boy, Ma Liang, who really loved to draw. And so one night he dreamed that an old man gave him a magical paintbrush and asked him to use it to help the less fortunate. When he awoke, the paintbrush was on his desk, and so he used it as asked, doing things like drawing a river when people had no water to use in their fields, or drawing a cow to help till the lands. Things were good, things were nice. Then a rich man wanted to steal the brush, because let's let rich men just fuck everything up, and sent people to straight up arrest Ma Liang so that he could have the brush, and then invited like all of his friends and family over for like a little magic paintbrush party, and started drawing with it, but none of the drawings became real. So he sent for Ma Liang and then asked if the boy would draw some pictures in exchange for his freedom. Ma Liang enacted some malicious compliance and said, yeah, for sure, but only if you swear to do exactly what you say. And the man's like, yeah, rad, sounds great. And then asked for a big golden mountain so he could go and collect gold. So Ma Liang painted a sea, and the man was like, what the fuck? I want the mountain. And so Ma Liang was like, okay, and painted a very small golden mountain, like way in the distance. And the man got really excited and asked for a big ship to go and collect the gold. So Ma Liang painted the ship. The man and a bunch of his family and friends like hopped on to go collect the gold. But when the ship was in the middle of the ocean, Ma Liang threw a big wave that destroyed the ship and killed everyone on board, and just went back to helping people. And that's the story. It's so chaotic. I love it. I also found a really gorgeous storybook on the internet that has like amazing illustrations with the whole story. So go and check it out because it's stunning. The Ace of Wands card represents creative potential and like really sudden inspiration. When the Ace of Wands is reversed, there's an idea coming from you, but you don't know what to do with it. You also might be having a hard time like finding your purpose in life. The message here is like, don't worry about it right now. Be patient with the things that you're working on and the ideas that you have. The prompt that I have for Ace cards is a new author, and for Wands, it's again something adventurous or inspiring. So I picked Son of a Trickster by Eden Robinson. This is an indigenous fantasy or magical realism fantasy. It's about this burnout kid, Jared, who has like a really big heart, but he has an alcoholic mom, a dad who has another family, and is just like trying to keep his family afloat, but he also talks to ravens and like blacks out sometimes. And his grandmother says that he's the son of a trickster and like not even human. And it's his story. I believe it's a trilogy. After reading a whole month of fantasies, I'm excited for something that's just a little fantastical, but still in our like contemporary universe, you know? That was what I picked for the Ace of Wands. Next, I pulled the Two of Wands reversed. The deity represented here, this is Janus, Roman god of gates, doors, and beginnings. He's associated with like the start of the day, the first month of the year, January, Janus. He's mentioned first in prayers, and one of the 7 hills of Rome was named after him. He's usually pictured with 2 faces, as you can see here, one looking forward and one looking back. In one myth, he is like the defender of an important Roman gateway. In another, while pursuing Cardea, who was known for leading her admirers to a cave and running away, same, he went with her but used the face on the back of his head to catch her before she could escape. Also, yikes. He's one of the earliest Roman gods in their mythology, and he's often referred to as like the god of gods. It's actually possible he was a real person too, which is fun. If the Ace of Wands is like inspiration, the Two of Wands is the action plan, but the Two of Wands, when it's reversed, is encouraging you to draw your attention inwards and like focus on your personal goals. So it's about like reconnecting with who you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it. Figure out what makes you happy. Woo! For the number 2 cards, my prompt is a book with 2 leads. Again, Wands makes it adventurous or inspiring, and so I picked Certain Dark Things by Silvia Moreno Garcia, which is her take on vampires. I am so excited because I freaking loved Mexican Gothic. So I'm absolutely pumped. It follows a street kid, a vampire on the run, and a cop, and I am reading it with my lovely friend Selena over at Bookworm Weeb. It's gonna be a good time. Yay, vampires. That is what I picked for the Two of Wands. The next card we've also seen before. This is the Page of Coins. The deity represented here is Baby Nieda, who is a Sami sun goddess. She is the goddess of the sun, spring, sanity, and is more of like a force of nature than an actual personified goddess. She is depicted as both masculine and feminine, and is also associated with the fertility of plants and animals, especially reindeer. The Sami also believe that madness was provoked by the lack of sunshine and light during the winter. So when springtime comes and the sun is back in the sky, prayers are made specifically for the people who are mentally ill because the sun is believed to have healing powers. The Page of Coins represents the beginning, fresh start, positivity, but when it is reversed, a very similar theme here. You are not ready to move forward with a new project or idea, or are procrastinating starting that project or idea. Although it also may suggest too much daydreaming about like new ideas without taking action on your current ones. The prompt that I have for page cards is again a YA book, and for coins it is something tense or funny. I decided not to spin the Wheel of Fortune because we'd already done that twice in this video. Because I just don't have a lot of young adult novels on my TBR list, I did not pick a BIPOC author for this one. The book that I did pick for it was There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. This is like a teen slasher flick, but in a book. And I took the recommendation from Gem's review over at Bookish Gems. She spoke so highly of it in her review, and it said she had so much fun reading it that I am just like excited. I digress. That was the book that I picked for Page of Coins. The next card that came up was the Queen of Cups, and this is Yamoja, the Yoruba goddess of rivers. And I just think this card is so freaking pretty. Yamoja is the goddess of the river and the mother of all 400 Orisha, or deities, in the Yoruba spiritual pantheon. Yamoja was basically a spiritual entity at like the beginning of time and was charged by Olofi, who's basically God, to assist Obatala with the formation of humans. And so Yamoja like comes to Earth preparing everyone for the arrival of humankind. She is also the Orisha of fertility and also protects those who live and work around the water. The Queen of Cups represents the surface of the unconscious. The actual like card or like feeling is very nurturing, warm. When it comes up in a spread, you might be embodying that motherly energy and have mastered giving that empathy and comfort without taking on the emotional issues of others. You are being asked to trust yourself in that. My prompt for Queen cards is a female author. For Cups, we are looking for something emotional or sad. And so I picked Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zoner, which actually came up in my books I want to read in 2022 video. This is Michelle Zoner's memoir about growing up in a predominantly white town in Oregon and her struggling with her mother's terminal cancer. I know it's just gotten rave reviews. I think I saw that it's being turned into a movie. Correct me if I'm wrong. That was the book that I picked for the Queen of Cups. The last card that I picked for this spread was the Two of Swords, which we also saw last time. This is Sita. So Sita is one of the main characters in the Hindu epic Ramayana. The king at the time, who had no children of his own, adopted her. Basically organized a contest when it was time for her to marry, that any person who could string the bow of Lord Shiva could marry her. And so Rama, who is the Hindu deity that embodies chivalry and virtue, was the only one who could draw the bow and then broke it, to the surprise of everyone. So they marry. Rama's father, King Dasaratha, announces his plans to crown him as heir. But Dasaratha's wife, the queen, is upset because she's worried about her other children and their future after Rama ascends to the throne. So basically calls in a favor with Dasaratha and says, you have to banish your son into exile. Sita insists on going with him. And while they're in exile, Ravana, who is the demon king of Lanka, lures Rama away as a golden deer and kidnaps Sita. She is held in Lanka for over a year, and Ravana keeps trying to marry her, and she manages to avoid it and maintain her chastity. And eventually Rama wages war against Ravana to get Sita back. But when she comes back, no one is clear on whether she still has her chastity or not, her virtue, because that's all that matters. She has to decide whether to be sent into exile and sent away from Rama, or to go through the test of fire to prove her chastity to the world. And the test of fire is basically just like, if you sit in flames and you don't die, you're virtuous. There's a lot of different versions on what happened during the test of fire. She makes that choice to do that, but she proves her virtue. Rama is crowned king. They live together. Unfortunately, a few years later, I guess something else happened, or her subjects got wind of whatever was going on, and they all question her chastity again. She just goes into exile with her children and is just forced to live in the forest. I don't know why the children are involved in this. Oh, I guess probably because the idea is that they aren't Rama's kids. Years later, when the boys grow up, I guess they are allowed to go back to Rama, and Sita's like, great, I did my job, I'm done. And Rama's like, no, come back, live as a queen with me. And she says, no, thanks, and instead allows Mother Earth to take her to a better world, which I think is probably the right choice for poor Sita. The Two of Swords, when it comes up in a spread, basically there's two options in some kind of challenging decision, and you don't know what to pick. It may also reflect indecision or an impasse. Basically, you gotta make a choice and try to pick one that reflects your values, but they're both gonna be difficult. So the prompt that I have for 2 cards, again, it's a book with 2 leads, and for sword cards is something informative or challenging. And so I picked A Burning by Megha Majumdar, which follows 2 characters, a Muslim girl who is accused of executing a terrorist attack because of a Facebook comment, and a gym teacher whose aspirations for greatness land him in the middle of a right-wing political party. These 2 characters' rise and fall are directly and inversely linked, and I am excited to read it. It sounds great and has just wonderful reviews. That was what I picked for the Two of Swords. Thank you so much for watching. If you have stuck it out all the way to the end, thank you so much. What are you reading in April? What's the plan? How are we feeling? Let's talk about books together. Also, I'm starting a TikTok. I'm doing the thing, and I'm starting a TikTok. So go and check out my Instagram, go and check out my TikTok if you want to follow and support me on a different platform. If you're looking for another video to watch by me, go and check out this one right here. It's a good time. And I'll see you all next week.